Hello, this is Will Faerber from Art to Ride, and today I'm going to take you through my latest lesson with Eszter and her horse Zamir. Eszter is in Hungary and has been working with me a little bit over a year or so since this horse was totally green, about a 3.5-year-old when we began. So she's taken this horse all the way from just a completely green baby to what we're going to see today. So here we're starting out lunging, and you can see that he's already stretching down nicely. We start him without any side reins and all and just get him swinging nicely through the trot. And that's all going beautifully, as you can see here. Really beginning to stretch out forward, have a nice big swing and trot. And so whereas, a year ago most of the lesson would have been just this, of course, now he very quickly goes through these first stages. He's going to change directions. So as soon as we get a nice swinging trot like that, that's all we're looking for. We're going to change directions still without the side reins again. Beginning to open up that walk really nicely behind. Always looking for that big active step. And once again he goes right forward into the beautiful stretch here. Swinging through very nicely. Now when we started this horse, once again he had almost no neck. The neck was very thin, and as soon as he stretched down he would be behind the bridle almost immediately. So we can see he's starting to fill up. He's starting to, his withers have started to come up to the shoulders really nicely. We're seeing a much better position of his neck there in the shoulders. You see how that base of his neck is beginning to really thicken up, so to speak, as he develops more top line. Once again, I remind everybody that the withers are not connected to anything but muscle and tendon. So once again, it is free to move in there. And as horses develop and finish their growing process, the withers coming up through the shoulders is also a big part of that. So once we just have a nice free swing like that without anything on, we put the side reins up. Notice they're coming from the upper position now with this horse. Handles that with no problem at all, stretching down into the contact. Just exactly like we would like to see it. Really nice trot swinging through there. Also a nice canter, staying over his back in the canter in all three gaits now. That's really quite good. Coming back to that active stretch again. So that's all we're looking for. So as the training progresses, the work we spend on the ground becomes shorter and shorter, and we spend more time on the horse's back. So very happy with that beautiful downwards transition. So once again we change directions quickly. You can see his walk here is a little bit ponderous. That is, it's not stepping through as much as big as he's starting to get it there to happen. That's what we're looking for. And once again, with the side reins long and connected to the upper position, he stretches right down into them. Staying really nicely out on his circles now. And that used to be quite a problem with this horse. Eszter's gotten to be quite a good hand here with him. That's what we're looking for there. He picks up the wrong lead once, no big deal. We don't make a big deal about that. We just bring him back to a trot, and we ask again. His balance was just headed in the wrong direction when she asked for the canter. There we go. And it was coming to the inside, so he picks up the correct lead. So something to always remember, if the horse is throwing its shoulder to the outside when you ask for the canter, it's probably going to pick up the wrong lead. But this comes really nicely on the second attempt. And back to a really nice swinging through trot. So the only thing I cut out of this was just her stopping and changing direction. So really, literally, that's all the time that it took to bring him today and be ready to get on. Whereas a year ago, most of the lesson would have been nothing but that and work in hand. So with him, we don't do the work in hand anymore. He's gotten to a place where he doesn't need that to be done. Gotten quite good about standing to be mounted, which is also a big part of training. And he does that really quite well. Getting on and off horses is always one of the most dangerous aspects of training young horses. I've probably seen more accidents at that stage than anything else I've ever seen. So I always insist that riders, when they get in the saddle, before they take off, I'm telling her there to stretch up and get her shoulders back. It's always those first steps with young horses when we don't know what they're going to do. And believe me, I've been on lots of young horses where, for whatever reason, they took a few steps and decided to take off bucking or something because something startled them. So it's always important that we be in the right position with our shoulders back, a little behind the motion. When horses aren't moving through their backs, then we want to be a little behind the motion. When horses are moving through the back, then we want to sit in motion with them. And of course, we never want to be ahead of the motion of the horse. But for young horses, this is all starting out very well. And you notice this walk is a little bit slow here starting off. So trying to get him to just open that walk and really open up the swing before we do anything else is always very important. This is coming a little bit better here. Now he's starting to open up the walk again. You can see right now he's a little bit slow. He's really not stepping through at the pace we'd like him a little more, to be a little more energetic. So that's what she's working on here, just to get him to open up that walk a little bit. Like that. That's getting much better all the time. And notice that she's still keeping her body a little bit stretched up and a little behind the motion at this point until he starts to really swing through. Pretty good leg yield there. A little bit slow, but coming, stepping nicely underneath his body, but just a little slower than we'd like it to be. Now it's also a summer day, so you may get on a hot day, you may get on a young horse, and they're a little bit sleepy, so to speak, is what he is a little bit today here. But the walk is starting to open up here better. There we go, starting to swing a little better here. Now some of the sort of hesitation you see there is the slowing of the camera itself. Remember, I'm halfway around the world from her, and sometimes the camera has to catch up for a moment. There, now I see him begin to open up that walk. So that's actually a pretty good working walk for him right there. While he's not stretching all the way down, he's nicely engaged, and the behind end is starting to come through with a little more active walk. That's starting to swing a little better there. The important thing when we're working young horses, when they are a little sticky about going forward, we never want to keep our legs clamped on them. It's always ask and release again. And of course, once you ask, you don't get a response, we increase the activity of that. In this case, we touch with our leg and nothing much happens. We give him a little tap with the whip to back that up a little bit. Now the walk is beginning to open up a little more. But his walk, even though he's not all the way in the stretch, we're not at the maximum walk he could give us, it's still a pretty nice 4-beat walk, stepping forward. He's not completely hollow or anything like that. So it's just not quite as active as we'd like him to be yet. You see doing a leg yield again. He responds to that very well, steps nicely into the body. And of course, like all young horses, there's some noise going on or something that he wants to pay attention to a little bit. We never make a big deal of that. And as I say, with young horses, I never, unless a horse is shaking, that's a different story. If a horse is actually trembling, you actually want to stop and get off, because that's a horse that's about to lose its mind. But most of the time, when horses just want to look at things, we just keep going. Just turn them a little bit away from what they're looking at and just keep going, because we don't want to get in the habit of of letting the horse think that it's going to stop every time that it wants to look at something, and we're going to let him stand there and ponder it. That becomes a self-perpetuating problem as time goes on if we don't keep them moving. See how now he's beginning to move through a little more, and you see how she came a little bit behind her, the motion a little bit, but now he's beginning to swing a little better. The forehand is coming out in front of him, he's beginning to stretch out and reach into the contact, and we see the step is becoming more active. Even though here he's starting to look at something over here a little bit, but she does a very good job of just keeping him going. We're starting to get a good swing in this now. And once again, you can see with this horse, even if he's not stretched all the way down, he has a pretty good 4-beat walk there. It's regular. So he's beginning to be able to come up into a working walk. Here it's a little bit hesitant, could be stepping a little deeper again. Kind of lost that a little bit there. She's working with him there to send him through a little more. Doing a little bit of a shoulder forward on this long side. And he's beginning to able to respond to that and step underneath himself. Getting a little bit of bend as he comes to the corner there. And you can see his head has come up, but even though his head has come up, his hind legs aren't falling out behind. He's slowed down a little bit, but his walk still stays pretty 4-beat. Of course, it's very typical of young horses when we go to change directions. You know, we may lose the bend a little bit, we may lose the top line a little bit. As training progresses, that gets easier and easier to the point that just doesn't become a problem. And here, once again, we'd like him to stretch a little bit forward, but once again, the walk is pretty good. It's 4-beat, he's stepping forward. A little shoulder forward here, and this comes really nicely this time. Actually showing a little bit of bend. Now, it could be a little more active in the step, but that's not bad at all. And of course, always remembering why we do lateral work. We do lateral work to engage the inside hind leg, which is why we work with young horses on circles most of the time in the beginning until they get consistent over their top lines. The inside, the circle helps us keep the inside leg engaging when we leg yield it a little bit to the outside. So when we're circling, we want to be a little bit shoulder forward much of the time, or any time the horse is disengaging a little bit. And once again, when the horse engages, then we want to just go straight. As I said, there's a purpose to the lateral work rather than just thinking it's pretty to go sideways, so to speak. So that walk was pretty good, but with this horse on a particular day, you can also recognize that, you know, he just needs to get going a little bit. To summer day, we'd like to walk a little more active. So we're going to take him on into the trot, which he does quite nicely here. Immediately starts to go into a stretch for her, though it could be a little bit more active. And he's still just a little bit behind the leg here. We'd like to trot a little bit bigger than it is there. There we go. He starts to get a little more active. Good there. Now he starts to get a little deeper in the stretch, starts to swing through a little more. Very nice there. And that's actually a pretty good working trot for him right there. That is, he's able to continue to work through the back even though he keeps his head up in a higher position. That's always the test. We're always looking at whether we lose the movement. The movement is what it's all about. So if whatever your head and neck position is that you're asking for is causing the horse to lose that swing through his back, well, we know it's no good and we have to let it lower again. So here in this case, he was being a little lazy and he was offering the canter. We've only just started cantering this horse a little bit. But he offers it, and it's a nice canter over its back. And so I know that this will help his trot. So we go ahead and do some canter with him. And we come back to the trot, rather than immediately just trying to force him to trot because it wasn't exactly what we wanted. You know, training is always a bit of a compromise. And in that particular case, compromising to let him canter a little bit was a good choice because he came back and the trot is better. So has a nice, almost consistent working trot now after that. So we always have to gauge how each horse that we works best. Some horses canter so bad that you really can't canter them at all in the beginning for quite some time. Some you can. So here he's once again developing pretty nicely into that working trot. He's able to come up a little bit and maintain that swing through his back. It's pretty nice right there. Once again, that slowing you're seeing is the camera just malfunctioning a little bit, since I'm halfway around the world from her. Now the trot's starting to swing quite nicely. And he's starting to stretch into it. And notice her body's a little straighter now. He starts to swing through. Very nice. We'll almost be able to go into that stretch. So again, I will never forget seeing the Los Angeles Olympic Games when Rainer Klimke warmed his horse up. And you can find lots of stuff about this online. And of course, any of the things by his daughter now, Ingrid, is doing a lot to promote correct riding, especially when we're seeing so many people being kicked out of the sport and being brought up on charges of abuse. This is the way you train horses without having to abuse them in the process. Not bad there. You can see that he kind of loses a little bit in the change of rein. Kind of wanted to see what was down there, lost the rhythm for a moment. Changing the rein is always a bit of a challenge for young horses to get them nicely in one direction, but it doesn't take long before he starts to swing. Now see, this is a little bit ponderous again, but he's starting to stretch a little better into it. It still needs a little bit more activity here. There we go, he starts to swing through better now. That's what we're looking for. Much better trot. There we go. Now we're getting a nice swing through. Of course, remember, it's not just when they stretch out in front. We've always got to get enough activity that we see them really swinging and begin to swing their front legs out forward as much as they're coming through behind. You know, if we get them to stretch and they're just going straight down with their necks and just pulling themselves along. So we have to learn to recognize when they're actually pushing and when they're pulling. So a horse can, if you go too slow in the stretch, they can just pull themselves along by their front legs just like they can when they're hollow. So we always have to be sure that we recognize the difference between those two things. So here we're going to canter him a little bit once again just to improve his trot work. This is really good. Comes up pretty much almost in a working canter now nicely. And once again, we've only just begun cantering this horse. That is on top of him. But that's coming really nicely. And of course we come back to the trot and get a little more active swing in it. Yeah. When you think about horses, they have to close up from the back towards the front, not the other way around. We see so many riders today who are trying to pull the front end into the back end. It just doesn't work that way because the front end doesn't move the way the back end moves. The back end can flex those hocks and lower and push. The front end can do nothing but pull itself along when the back end is not working. You see right there, he's pulling a little bit, but he starts to swing through. See how the stride opens up? That's what we're looking for. So he starts to swing through and start to lift and engage his top line. So that's really quite good right there. You could see him stalling there a little bit. She got a little behind the motion and sent him on again. Now we're keeping him up about midway, and he's beginning to develop a really nice working trot. Changing the rein again. Once again, you can see that's a little difficult for him. Loses the impulsion for just a moment, so it's important as soon as he does that we just reestablish that again. Getting quite good there. And again, we go back. he wants to canter a little bit rather than engage in the trot. So rather than fighting him about that, we're just going to come and ask him to canter a little bit. The trot's always better. If you can get a good canter, the way this horse is cantering, it's going to do him some good, and you'll come back and the trot will be even better. Now, if the canter is so disorganized, he's so hollow that the horse can't do anything but throw itself around on the canter, that's not going to help him at all. In fact, just the opposite. When horses can't get over their backs, we really want to do very little canter, as of course the faster we go, the more damage we do to the horse's legs if the horse is not over its back. So again, remembering that putting a horse over its back is what puts the shock absorbers on a horse and lets them absorb the concussion of the movement into the soft tissue rather than taking it all in their joints. Witnessed today by how many people are having 3- and 4-year-old horses injected in their hocks and things should show people, and of course veterinarians who are doing that to horses should be telling people that the reason you're having this done is because of the way you're training, but unfortunately most veterinarians do not tell people that any longer. They don't know any difference themselves. I was very fortunate to grow up with some of the best veterinarians in America, working for my family and then for the people that I worked with when I left home, who really cared about horses and were horsemen themselves. That's a rare quality these days. Really nice. So after that canter, we came back and got a much better stretch, much more active, a little more through his back. Pretty good working trot right there. You can see he's trying to stall a little bit, but it doesn't take much to correct him again. Now notice she has no backwards tension on the reins at this point or at any time. Once again, we're never trying to pull the head back into the body. That is the biggest mistake that we see happening all over the horse world today. That is the wrong concept of how a horse should ultimately develop collection. Remember, collection is nothing different than a working trot. It's just a higher level of the same thing. With more strength, the horse can lift its body more. So here, once again, she's taking him through this. He's gotten this thing of that he wants to be a little lazy about the trot and wanting to canter a little bit. So that's why we just go ahead and do it with him, because he has a good canter and he can do it. But most horses, if they have something lazy, they'd rather give you sort of the lazy effort than a good effort. So after that, he got there, started to swing through a little better, and we come back and just give him a walk again, letting him stretch out. But notice no time throughout all this has he ever been stressed. But we always want to come back and give him a little breather. Now at this point, up until now, most of the time when the horse got really well, got really good over its back and this sort of thing in the beginning of training, well, we just stopped. So now we're just beginning to send that on. In other words, get him to a really good point and then come back and walk and ask him to give it to us again. As I said, in the beginning of training, as soon as the horse gives us something good, we stop for the day, and so that they learn what it is that we're asking them to do. And that's what we're doing here. So in the last couple of lessons, we've begun having some walk and then ask him to come back and start all over again. Not to start all over again, but to come back up, develop impulsion, and come back into the frame again. Or that is, into a working gait. And they, we may, when they're in the habit of every time they do something correct, we stop, and as we do in the beginning, maybe a little step. They might not. Oh, wait a minute, resist a little bit the first time that we begin to ask them to go back to work again. But it doesn't take long, as you see with him, to get back into the swing of things. If what we have been asking them to do has not injured them in any way, has not caused them a great deal of pain or anything, they're usually pretty happy to begin to come back to work again. They made that upwards transition quite nicely, didn't hollow that time. Could have swung through a little more actively right off the bat, but it wasn't bad at all. And coming back to a pretty nice working trot. Once again, you can see him trying to give her a lazy canter rather than a good trot again. But it's good with him. You notice that when he raises his head up, there isn't a lot of change. He doesn't just fall out behind. So that tells us that those muscles across the back are really starting to learn their job, and they're not just disconnecting. Very nice. Starting to develop a really nice working trot here. And you could see how there for a moment he was still trying to give her a little canter, rather give her a little bit of canter than the trot she was asking for, but didn't take her long to straighten that out and get what she was asking for. So that was very nice, coming right back into that again, stretching him back out again. So in these stages when we're just bringing him back, as I say, these first stages when we're starting to get him used to the idea that we can let him rest and then put him back to work again, we don't ask for a whole lot. Once again, we want this all to be a happy experience for the horse. Believe me, if the horse likes the work, it's a lot safer. When horses hate riders or hate the work you're doing with them, they look for every opportunity to get out of it. But we're ending up with a nice swinging, stretching walk, which is where we want to begin, but where we always want to end, certainly. We can't always begin there, but we can certainly end there in those cases. So he stretched out in front of her again, gave us a really nice walk. So like any good athlete, we want to warm up, do the core of our work, and then we do a little warm down, always. So here once again, he's getting into a nice stretch in the walk, staying out in front of her leg. And you notice that he's not giving her any big trouble about anything at all, just a little confusion about, once again, wanting to canter a little bit when we were asking for a bigger trot. But that really didn't cause any major problems there. And once again, this is an amateur rider who's been able to bring this horse from a green horse all by herself to doing everything you're seeing here and beyond, which is how it should be. I mean, once you can ride a little bit, if the training is correct and we get horses working over their backs, all those other issues that people think about as being difficult just disappear all by themselves, because the horse gets a work ethic, you might say, once it learns how to work correctly, and it doesn't resent the work. So here, once again, we came back to the trot again, because we're just doing that thing of testing him. We're just beginning to do this of putting him back to work after the work, see if he's ready to come back, that he hasn't just gone, okay, I'm done for the day. Now we can see he's starting to get a little tired here. So we know we're getting near the end of what we're going to do, but we're going to take him on through there. He starts to develop the working trot again, starts to swing through. That's all we're asking for. You know, when you don't fight with the front end of a horse, it's a lot easier. They accept everything that we want so much easier. But if you're pulling and fighting with the front end, trying to force the horse into something that you think is collection, well, in most cases, they're going to be resistive. Now, of course, I should point out that there are people that say they're classical dressage riders, but they're riding their horses hollow with their heads up in the air, who have this idea. And of course, they never touch the reins at all. Their horses never work over their backs, but it's a misconception about dressage. They think their horses are light. Well, they're only light because they never touch the reins. So once again, we see him have a little difficulty here, just asking him once again to come back to that full trot again before we give him his finish there. And that's coming back nicely now, accepting the idea. Going to do a little more canter with him here, just same thing, the idea. If you want to give us a lazy trot, well, let's do a little canter if that's what you offer. So we take what they offer us and turn it into a move and say, okay, you want to canter? Let's canter a little bit. Once again, you can do that with a horse who has a decent canter. There, now we come back and we get a good swing through in the trot after that little canter work. Really good now, that's what we're looking for. You can see that the hardest thing with young horses is keeping that consistent rhythm. We do another little canter here. So this is the first time we've ever pushed it this far and done this much canter with him. He handles it well. Finally comes back into the big swing and the stretch. This is what we were looking for all along. So we did a little canter, and that helped him, rather than trying to fight him about the canter or say no to him. So this came back to a really nice swing through in the trot here. And with a young horse, and once again, first time doing this, that's all we need to see. So this ended up in a beautiful place here. And she brings him back to a walk. So Eszter's done a wonderful job with this horse. Every time I see her, it looks better and better. She's had no problems. Nothing dangerous has happened along the process, and she's brought this horse from being a totally green baby to where you see it now, and I'm sure he's just going to continue right into full working gaits, and it will not be long. So great job, Eszter. Once again, this is Will Faerber from Art to Ride. I hope everybody enjoyed this take on this lesson this morning. How nicely he stands to her for the dismount. And of course, she always rewards him right then and there. So again, Will Faerber from Art to Ride. Have a great day with your horses.